It was raining, the kind of rain that tastes like metal on your lips. Cold, bitter, like the city was trying to wash something off its conscience. I felt it sinking through my coat and into my bones as I walked, head down, each step echoing on the wet pavement like it was being recorded. Chicago after midnight always looks tired, like it knows too much. And that night I looked just like it. Exhausted, frayed, afraid of things I couldn't name yet. Taxi light reflections smeared across the flooded street like crime scene tape. Wind scraped the fire escapes above me, making every shadow look alive. My breath rose in small white puffs that felt numbered, like I only had a few left. I kept thinking someone was behind me, even when nobody was. That's the kind of fear that doesn't need proof. It just needs a heartbeat. I remember wondering, if I vanished tonight, who would notice? Who would even ask? The thought should have scared me. But it didn't. Not anymore. What scared me was how normal that felt. My instincts whispered, "Go home," but the streets pushed back with a low growl of traffic and a distant siren, like they were telling me to wait. And maybe it was exhaustion, or loneliness, or whatever fog the rain pushes into your blood. But I listened. I always listen. Silence has edges, and tonight they felt sharp. By the time I reached my building, my shoes were soaked, and every light in the neighborhood looked like it was flickering just for me. I slipped inside and climbed the stairs, each step creaking like it was warning me. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. My door, my safe place, or what was left of it. I locked it twice, pressed my back against it, as if that would keep everything out. It didn't, because the city had already followed me in. I didn't turn on the lights. Sometimes darkness is a shield. Sometimes it's camouflage. That night, it was both. I stared through my window, watching rain race down the glass like the sky was trying to escape. My heartbeat wouldn't slow down. I told myself it was fine. Fine. Just a word people use while drowning. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I don't know why I answered. Maybe I was too tired to think. Maybe I was waiting for something to happen. Maybe I wanted proof that the feeling following me wasn't just in my head. I should have ignored it. I should have let it ring. I should have... But I didn't. I clicked answer, and for 2 long breaths, I heard nothing. Then I heard him. A voice. A male voice. Deep. Controlled. The kind that feels like a hand closing slowly around your wrist. Not hard enough to hurt. Just firm enough to promise that it could. She's not going anywhere. Deal with it. I didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't even breathe. I just listened. A chair shifted. Footsteps. A glass set down. Lighter clicks. Exhale. Smoke drifting through the line like he wanted me to smell it. A hush of voices. Men. Powerful men. "Boss," someone said. "What about the girl?" That pause, I swear I felt it in my bones. "She's no longer a problem," he said. Then lower, almost intimate. "She's mine now." The room erupted with low laughter, paperwork being shuffled, a door closing somewhere. They talked about docks, shipments, Tuesday night. But all of that blurred into static behind those words. She's mine now. I remember thinking, whoever she is, run. I tried to hang up. My thumb reached for the screen. But before I could, he stopped speaking. The conversation shifted. The air on the other end changed. I didn't know why until he said this. "Who's there?" I'd breathed. He heard me. Panic sliced the air in my lungs. I hung up. I don't even remember deciding to. One moment I was listening. The next I was staring at my phone like it was a loaded weapon. I prayed that was the end of it. But the city doesn't make deals with prayers. I barely slept. Every sound felt too sharp. Every shadow looked like it knew my name. I kept replaying his voice in my head. Something about it lingered. Something dangerous. But something magnetic too. I hated that. I hated that I couldn't forget it. By morning, the rain had faded, but the sky still looked bruised. I made coffee that tasted like burnt pennies and got dressed for work like I was pretending to be human. I work at a used bookstore off Halstead, shelving paperbacks and ringing up customers who barely look at me. That's fine. I always preferred being unnoticed. Silence is safer than sympathy. Sympathy has teeth. But that day, silence felt like a warning. I walked faster than usual, checked every reflection, passed a police station and stopped walking for a moment. I stared at the entrance, thought about going in, thought about telling them everything I heard. But what would they do? What could they do? I heard a dangerous voice on the phone. Isn't evidence. They'd think I was paranoid, or unstable, or lonely. Maybe I was all three. So I kept walking. The bell above the bookstore door gave that tired little chime as I entered. The same smell of old pages and dust. Usually it calms me. That day, it only reminded me how small I am. I shelved books, straightened displays, nodded to customers, tried to feel normal, tried to forget that there are conversations you can't unhear, voices that follow you long after the call ends. It was late afternoon when he walked in. Not him, not the voice from the call, but someone who worked for him. I didn't know how I knew, but I knew. The way predators recognize each other. His hair was slicked back. His shoes were too clean. He pretended to browse, but his eyes weren't looking at books. They were mapping exits, counting witnesses, searching for someone. Searching for me. When he finally approached the counter, he scribbled in a notebook and pointed at the journal section. That's when I saw it. His sleeve shifted just a little. A tattoo on his wrist, sharper than the lines on a map, clear enough to be a warning. I showed him the aisle. He didn't go to it. He turned and left instead. He bought nothing. The bell rang again when he exited, but this time, it felt like a clock starting. When my shift ended, I didn't take my usual route home. I crossed streets I normally didn't. I watched every corner twice, every car, every man in a dark coat. By the time I reached my apartment again, the wind was picking up. People say bad things happen after dark, but sometimes darkness begins before the sun even sets. I locked the door, didn't turn on the lights, sat by the window like I was waiting for something. Or someone. When I finally saw him, the one from the phone, I didn't hear footsteps. First I saw a car, then I saw a presence. He stepped out slow, no umbrella, no hesitation. The rain didn't touch him the way it touched the rest of us. He scanned the street like it belonged to him. He looked up, at my window, straight through the darkness, as if he'd known where I was all along. My breath caught in my throat. My phone buzzed again. Same number. I didn't answer, but I heard his voice. Outside. Pick it up, he said. Soft, commanding, unavoidable. And I did. I answered. 2 seconds of silence. Then, you shouldn't listen to conversations that don't belong to you. I wanted to speak. I couldn't. My pulse was rushing too loud. But since you did, he continued, his voice lowering, now you belong to me. Thunder cracked across the sky. The car door opened. Someone approached the building. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I stood very still and waited. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The hallway outside my door groaned softly. Just wood settling, I told myself. Just the building aging like everything else in this city. But then came the sound that didn't belong to this place. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Not running, not nervous. Someone walking like they had purpose, like they already owned the next 60 seconds. They stopped outside my door. Not a knock. Not yet. Just presence. The quiet felt alive, like it was waiting for me to scream, but I didn't. My instincts weren't yelling run anymore. They were whispering something far more dangerous. He's real. I thought about hiding, but where? My apartment was too small to hold secrets. The air itself felt too thin. I backed toward the kitchen, almost tripping over my own breath. The window was behind me, rain crawling down it slow as blood. I glanced toward it, third-floor drop. Not enough to kill me, but enough to break something important. The footsteps outside shifted. A faint smudge of shadow slipped under the door, shaped like boots. Heavy. Male. They know I'm here. The phone was still in my hand. I hadn't realized I'd been gripping it this entire time. My nails marked half moons into my skin. I knew I had seconds. I should have called for help. Dialed someone. Anyone. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, facing the door. And that's when the knock came. Once. Calm. Like a question with only one answer. I managed to speak, though my voice barely made it out of my mouth. Who's there? No response. Just the sound of someone exhaling slowly, as if to prove they weren't a ghost. Then another voice, lower, almost respectful. We're not here to hurt you. The words were meant to calm me. They didn't. Because men who don't mean to hurt you never use words like that. He continued, The boss wants to talk, that's all. Another voice, closer, younger, forced politeness like a bad aftertaste. Please open the door, Miss Reed. My heart slammed against my ribs. They knew my name. I thought of the call. I thought of his words. I don't chase. I collect. And I understood this wasn't a chase. It was a collection. I swallowed. Hard. My eyes flicked again to the window. Rain tapping. Wind rising. City watching. I imagined myself climbing out, scrambling down a rust-wet fire escape under the moonlight. But something told me they'd be waiting outside too. That this was already decided long before I answered that call. Keys rattled. My locks. They were unlocking them. I didn't know how. They shouldn't have had a key, but I heard it. That metallic slide. The sound of something sacred being opened by someone who didn't ask permission. My voice finally cracked. Wait! The deadbolt clicked. The door opened. 2 men stepped inside. Suits darker than night. No hesitation. They filled the room like the lights had been turned on. Only the lights never came on. One had dark hair and gray eyes, the kind that read a room in one glance. The other, taller, wore gloves and had a scar along his jaw that looked like it had its own story. Gray eyes scanned everything. Then he looked right at me. Miss Reed, you need to come with us. Need, not should, not please. Need. I stood still. My knees felt waterlogged. I wondered if this was how prey felt in the last seconds. Numb and strangely calm. I tried to speak, but my throat clicked instead of words. The man with the scar barely looked at me, but I still felt the weight of him. Silent, unmoving, like violence had found a body to live inside, He shut the door behind them. Gray eyes stepped forward. "You're not under arrest. You're not in danger," I cut in. "That's a lie." He paused, then nodded, as if he respected honesty when it bled. "You're right," he said. Fear and fascination collided in me, and when adrenaline should have pushed me to run, something else held me there. Gray eyes lifted his hand, slow, careful, as though approaching a scared animal. "We won't touch you unless you try to run. The boss doesn't want you hurt." I found my voice, tiny but alive. "Then what does he want?" Another pause, another exhale, then those words again. "He wants you." The room shrank around me. Scarjaw finally spoke. His voice was smoke over ice. "Please put on your coat. Weather's rough tonight." I didn't move. "What if I say no?" He blinked once, not slowly, not quickly, just decisively. "That," he said, "would be a mistake." My legs trembled, but I reached for my coat. I didn't know if it was fear, or the quiet curiosity blooming inside my ribs like a bruise, that same curiosity that made me answer that call. But I put it on, slowly, and both men watched, like I was committing some ceremonial act. Gray eyes nodded. "Thank you." The tall one opened the door. Rain hissed through the hallway, as if it were warning me one last time. I stepped out. The air felt colder than before. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lights flickering like they were afraid of what was walking beneath them. One man walked in front of me, one behind. My footsteps echoed. We went down the stairs. 1 flight, 2, 3. With every step I thought, this is the last moment I can turn back. This is the very last one. But I didn't turn. I don't know why, but I didn't. Outside, the city still wore its black coat of rain. The street glistened like something sacred, or violated. A car waited at the curb. Black. Windows tinted enough to hide sins. I swallowed. "Is he inside?" Gray eyes opened the passenger door for me. Not quite courteous, not quite forceful. "No," he said, "but he's expecting you." I stared at him. Wind pushed the collar of my coat back like unseen fingers. "Why me?" I asked. His eyes softened, but only a little. "You heard something you shouldn't have. And now he wants to know which kind of person you are." "What does that mean?" "It means he thinks you might be useful, or dangerous." He leaned in a little, "But he hasn't decided which yet." My pulse jackknifed at that. Not from terror, from something else. I climbed into the car. The door closed like a sentence being written. The city blurred past the window in streaks of orange and white. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching buildings flicker like thoughts I couldn't hold on to. I felt their eyes on me, the 2 men. I felt their silence, and somewhere in it, I felt him. Not here, but surrounding everything. "Does he have a name?" I asked finally. Scarjaw looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Yes," he said, "but no one says it unless they mean it." The car turned. A bridge loomed ahead, slicing through fog. My stomach dropped, not from motion, from certainty. "We're not going to kill you," Gray Eyes said softly. I believe he meant it, but I didn't feel safer. Then, Scarjaw's voice again from the front. "He wants to meet you himself. Don't worry." He paused. Too long. "But people don't usually worry until after the meeting." We drove on. Time stretched. The rain tapped the window like it was trying to speak. For the first time since answering that call, I wondered if I should have been more afraid than I actually was. And that scared me more than anything. The car slowed. A gate opened. Shadows towered. Somewhere beyond them, he was waiting. And whether I liked it or not, I was already walking toward him. The gate clanged shut behind us like the city itself was locking me out. The car rolled forward and I felt something shift inside me, like I'd stepped across a line that didn't exist on the map, but would still change everything after it. A long driveway stretched ahead, slick with rain and low fog curling across the ground like smoke from a crime scene that never made the news. Lights glowed from somewhere distant, muted by the storm, like the house was breathing in the dark. It didn't need to be seen to be believed. It just existed. And its existence alone felt like a threat. My fingers tightened around the seatbelt, not for safety, but for anchor, as if my body was afraid it might float away without something holding it down. Gray Eyes finally spoke. "When we arrive, let us do the talking. Don't make sudden moves. Don't lie. And don't look afraid." I let out the smallest breath. Is there a reason to be afraid? He didn't look at me when he answered, "There's always a reason." The car pulled to a stop before the mansion. I say mansion, but that word feels too soft. Like something you'd tour for real estate rather than tread carefully through with your heartbeat in your ears. This place felt old, not from time, but from stories it wouldn't dare repeat. From things that happened here that never made it to courtrooms, or confessions, or graves. Scarjaw stepped out first. His shoes echoed against the wet concrete, sharp, precise. Gray Eyes followed. Then they both turned to look at me. Just look, waiting to see what kind of person I was going to be now. I stepped out. The rain hit me with the kind of cold that feels intentional. I smelled wet stone, iron, and something else beneath it. Expensive cologne, faint, lingering, as if someone passed here not long ago. Someone powerful enough to leave a shadow behind. They led me up the steps. The door was already open, as if it expected me. As if nothing here waited for permission. Inside, warm air, dim lights, silence that seemed carefully curated. I heard the fire before I saw it. Soft, crackling, like it was trying to whisper something comforting, but didn't know how. Everything smelled faintly of smoke and polished wood. A house of wealth and memory. We walked down a hallway. Our footsteps didn't echo here. The carpet swallowed them whole. My pulse was the loudest thing in the room, and I hated that he would hear it before seeing me. We stopped at a door. Wood, dark, heavy. Gray Eyes placed a hand against it, not knocking, just touching it. Scarjaw glanced back at me once, briefly, like he wanted to memorize my expression. "You'll be fine," Gray Eyes said. "Just answer honestly. Don't pretend. Don't provoke him." "He hates pretending," Scarjaw added quietly. "He. Always he." His name was never used, like using it meant summoning him. The door opened, but he wasn't inside. Not yet. Instead, the room held only a few things. A table, 2 chairs, a single lit lamp, a vase of white lilies, fresh ones. Everything arranged like the scene of an interrogation wearing formal attire. Gray Eyes gestured. "Sit. He'll be here soon. Don't speak until he addresses you." My legs carried me forward even though they didn't feel like they belonged to me. I sat. The 2 men stood on either side of the door, their silence forming walls around me. The lamp had a warm glow, but it didn't comfort me. It felt like a spotlight before judgment. The chair across from me sat empty, but it felt occupied already. The presence of someone who didn't need to be seen to be felt. Someone who didn't walk in rooms. Rooms adjusted themselves around him. Minutes passed, or seconds. I couldn't tell. Maybe time works differently near certain people. A click sounded outside, soft, controlled. Footsteps approached, measured, deliberate, expensive. Not like the men who brought me here. They moved like soldiers. This person moved like an axis. Gray eyes looked away, even before the door opened. Not out of fear, out of respect. Then the door shifted inward without hurry. He walked in. Not a man who needed to announce himself. Not a man who had to hurry. He didn't glance at the guards, didn't look for permission. His suit was a shade of black I'd never seen before. Not matte, not glossy. Just dark enough to bend the light around it. I didn't know his name yet, but I knew his gravity. He didn't stare at me immediately. He walked to the other chair, pulled it out quietly, sat down like he'd been expecting this moment. Like everything led here. He looked at me, and I felt every instinct I had collide. Danger, admiration, suspicion, fascination. "You made a mistake," he said. His voice, it was definitely the one from the call. "But you didn't hang up immediately," he said softly. "You listened. You stayed. Why?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. He studied me, slowly, carefully, like I was a code he already cracked, but wanted to hear me read aloud anyway. His hands rested on the table, calm, unmoving, but every inch of him felt controlled, calculated. "Aria Reed," he continued, "bookstore employee, lives alone, no close family nearby, plays piano sometimes, runs on Sundays, never makes trouble, until last night." "How do you know?" "I know what I need to know," he said, without apology, without arrogance, just fact. He leaned in, not enough to cross the table, but close enough for me to feel his presence like static on skin. "You heard things you shouldn't have," he said, "and I don't like loose ends." My first real words came then, fragile but honest. "Are you going to kill me?" His expression didn't change, but something in the air did. "No," he said. "If I wanted that, we wouldn't be talking." Then he lifted his gaze slightly, and even though the room was quiet, something dangerous stirred between us. "I don't intend to harm you," he said, "but I need to know whether you intend to harm me." A hush followed. I didn't know how to answer. So I spoke the truth I didn't even understand fully until it escaped my lips. "I don't know." A single breath left him, the faintest sign he hadn't expected that. He nodded slowly. "Honest. Good." Silence stretched, threaded with something unspoken. Firelight flickered faintly in the corner, casting his shadow across the wall like a mark of ownership. He studied me. "I can erase you, your records, your history, your existence." Then, steady. "But I don't want to. I want to understand you." Something trembled inside me. Not fear. Not quite. "What do you want from me?" I asked. His eyes darkened. Not with anger. With intent. "I want to know why you stayed on that call," he said quietly. "Why you listened. Why you didn't hang up." The moment felt surgical, like he had cut right into a part of me I'd never shown anyone. "I don't know," I said again, but softer. This time it wasn't defense. It was confession. I think I wanted to understand what danger sounded like. He let that answer exist. Didn't rush to challenge it. Just absorbed it the way teachers absorb answers from students they didn't expect much from, but got something more. Then he said, "Danger doesn't sound like anything." Another pause. His eyes pinned mine. "It feels like choice." My heart pounded once, hard. He rose from the chair, without sound, without effort, walking around the table until he stood behind me, not threatening me, just surrounding me. The air shifted as he leaned slightly closer, not touching, but close enough to make the world feel very small. His voice came near my ear, quiet as a secret. I don't know yet if you are a threat or a possibility. I held still, completely. You can go home tonight, he continued. My breath caught. But my people will watch you. They'll watch everyone around you. You will live as usual. But understand, every second from now on, you exist within my decision. He circled back to the front of the table. His gaze held mine with something unreadable. Consideration, calculation, curiosity. I don't choose lightly, he said. I swallowed. Choose what? He stepped closer, closer, until the light caught the faint silver in his tie pin. A wolf's head. Whether I keep you, he said. Not threat, not question. Promise. He moved toward the door. The guard straightened, silent. He looked back once, not to warn me, but to confirm something. Arya Reed, he said. You belong to me now. Not as a prisoner, not as a toy, as an investment. I don't harm what I invest in, but I don't lose it either. He paused, then said almost softly, You listened to me once by mistake. He waited a beat. Next time, I want you to choose it. And then he left. The door closed behind him. I felt it. The moment my life didn't end, but changed ownership. The door clicked behind him, but it didn't sound like closure. It sounded like a signature. The guard stayed, still silent, identical to before, but something in the room shifted. Space itself felt acknowledged, as though the walls had just memorized me. I didn't turn to look at them. I didn't look at the door. I looked at the chair where he sat and felt the weight of presence and absence. His shadow still lived here. Or maybe I imagined it. Maybe everything was thicker now. The air, the light, the quiet. I felt as if he'd left something behind on purpose. Not an object, not evidence, an imprint. You can stand now, Grey Eyes said. His voice felt smaller than before. Not weak, just humbled by the aftershock of something greater. I stood slowly. My legs felt untrustworthy, like they belonged to a person who should be shaking, but wasn't. Like they were following orders I hadn't spoken aloud. Scarjaw opened the door. Grey Eyes gestured toward it. We'll take you home. The word home suddenly felt fragile, like a soap bubble too close to a knife. I walked back through the hallway. The carpet swallowed our footsteps again, but I could still hear my heart. Not thundering, not panicked. Something worse, too quiet. Precise. Considering things I didn't try to name. Because some names, once spoken, can't be taken back. Outside rain had slowed to a drizzle. The air smelled of copper and wet leaves. For the first time since arriving, I breathed in fully, like I'd been underwater without realizing it. Scarjaw opened the car door. I slid in. Grey Eyes sat beside me. The engine hummed to life, and soon we were gliding down the long driveway, away from the house that felt less like a place and more like a verdict. Finally, when the gates drifted from view, Grey Eyes looked at me. Not with sympathy, but evaluation. His tone was clean, professional, almost polite. You did well. It sounded like he was complimenting a chess move. I stared ahead. He didn't ask me anything important. He asked you everything important, Grey Eyes replied. He just phrased it differently. I let that sit in silence for a few seconds, then turned to him. What do I call him? Scarjaw glanced at me through the mirror before Gray Eyes answered. You don't, he said. There was no bite in his tone, no cruelty, just truth. And truth has its own gravity. I pressed. So he has no name? He has a name, Gray Eyes said. But names are locks. And he doesn't need locks. He has keys. That sentence stayed with me for the rest of the ride. Words can do that. Get under your skin so quietly you start thinking they were always there. Lights began to appear on the streets. Familiar ones. Traffic signals. Storefronts closed for the night. Puddles reflecting neon signs too tired to turn off. We were back in the city. My world, small, safe, predictable. But it no longer felt like mine. Gray Eyes turned to me. You're free to live as you have. For now. For now. That phrase never sounded temporary before. Tonight it felt terminal. Outside my building, the car stopped. Scarjaw waited, engine still running. Gray Eyes faced me fully. I'll give you advice. Take it however you wish. He paused. Tell no one. Not about tonight. Not about him. Not about us. That felt predictable, logical. But then something shifted in his expression. Just slightly. And if you find yourself wanting to tell someone... His eyes pinned mine. Tell him instead. My pulse faltered. Why? Gray Eyes exhaled slowly, like the answer cost something. Because it's safer to walk into the storm than shout into the wind. I understood. More than I wanted to. He opened the door for me. A strange courtesy. I stepped out. The drizzle dampened my hair instantly, turning each breath colder than the last. I started toward my building, but before I could reach the door, Gray Eyes called out quietly through the rain, Miss Reed. I turned. He looked at me with a stillness that felt earned through years. He invests very rarely, he said, and never for sentiment. If I were you, I'd learn which one you are. Then the door closed, and the car pulled away, slow, deliberate until it disappeared down the wet street like it had never existed. The city was quiet again, too quiet. I unlocked my door with hands that didn't tremble, but maybe should have. Inside, the warmth of lamps, the scent of old books from work still clinging to my clothes, the mug from this morning still sitting in the sink. A life untouched. Except it wasn't. It had fingerprints on it now, invisible, but permanent. I took off my coat, hung it up, walked to the piano sitting by the window. I hadn't touched it in weeks. Suddenly, for reasons beyond logic, I lifted the cover, pressed a single key. C. It rang out, soft, then faded into the silence that already existed without me knowing. I tried another, then another. Soon my hands were playing without permission, like they knew something I didn't. The melody came slow, hesitant, exploring, and I realized I was listening to danger, not through a phone this time, but from somewhere inside me. The next morning felt different. It wasn't anything tangible. My apartment looked the same. The world outside sounded the same. But silence felt like a choice now, not a condition. I made coffee. It tasted stronger than usual, though I hadn't changed anything. I dressed, walked to work. The air was crisp. A few cabs passed. The bookstore sign flickered like always. Everything normal. But I couldn't unfeel the weight of something watching me, quietly, politely, efficiently. I unlocked the storefront. Sometimes I wonder if things change slowly, the way rivers carve rock, or instantly, like a bullet deciding a trajectory. That morning felt like both. Hours passed. People came, browsed, left. A rainy Tuesday wearing its ordinary face. Then, around noon, he entered. Not gray eyes, not scarjaw. Him. No suit today. Dark coat, collar upturned. Gloves. A quietness about him, even when he moved. Kind of stillness reserved for predators and surgeons. Customers glanced. Some stepped aside. They didn't fully know why, but they felt it. Authority has its own weather. He approached the counter, unhurried. I stood still. The register's glow reflected faintly on his jaw. There were no guards, no walls. Just paperbacks and dust motes and fluorescent lights too bright for shadows. We were alone, in plain sight. "Aria Reed," he said softly. "How is your morning?" My voice worked. "Fine." He looked around briefly, then at me. "I wanted to see where you stand, before I decide where you'll go." He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Power doesn't smile. It simply exists. It was in his gaze, in the distance between us that felt measured, in his calm, especially his calm. "What do you do here?" he asked. "I help people find books." "And who helps you find what you're looking for?" The question landed with the weight of a hand pressed gently over a pulse point. I didn't answer. He didn't rush me. He didn't need answers immediately, only honesty eventually. He lifted a book from the counter. A thin one I'd read years ago. Poetry. He opened to a random page but didn't look at it. He seemed to be listening for something inside it. "You play the piano," he said after a moment. "Do you play well?" "No," I said truthfully. He closed the book. "That's good," he said. "People who play too well often forget to listen." Again, the subtle electricity in the air. Not attraction, not fear. Something rarer. Alignment. He placed the book gently back on the counter. "Someone will contact you soon. Not me. Listen when they speak. Speak only when necessary. Trust carefully." He stepped back, and though he stood 3 feet away, it felt like miles. "And when your instincts disagree with your reason," he said softly, "ask yourself which one sounds like what you heard on that call." I nodded slowly. I didn't know why, but I did. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway, looked at me one last time. "You listened once by mistake," he reminded me. A faint breath, maybe a hint of something that could become a smile someday, but not today. Make the next time intentional. Then he walked into daylight, disappearing into crowds that didn't know a storm had just brushed shoulders with them. And once again, the world looked unchanged. But inside me, something had already chosen a direction. I just didn't know yet where it would lead. But I knew this much. I'd follow the sound, even if it led to danger. Especially if it did. I didn't see him for the next 4 days. That's what bothered me most. Not fear, not guilt, not even curiosity. It was the silence he left behind. It echoed louder than any threat could. I moved through my days like someone walking through a dream that remembers what it used to be. I served coffee to regulars, recommended books I barely remembered reading, smiled when expected, spoke only when necessary. But inside, I was listening. Not for footsteps, not for phone calls. For the subtle shift in the air that tells you something is moving toward you before you see it. Instinct has a sound. It isn't loud, but you feel it against your skin. Like static, like breath, like someone whispering your name before deciding whether to spare you. On Friday evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and turned the bookstore windows gold for a moment, someone entered. It wasn't him. It wasn't even anyone I recognized. She was young, maybe mid-20s, sharp bob haircut, expensive wool coat, navy blue, no jewelry but a thin gold band around her wrist. Her lipstick was too perfect to have been applied in a moving car. Her hands were still, too still. I greeted her like any customer. Calm voice, neutral smile. But her gaze told me she hadn't come to browse. She didn't introduce herself. She went to the poetry section, walked down the aisle like she already knew where everything was. I watched her discreetly. She didn't rush, didn't stall. She picked one book, small, hardcover, black spine, brought it to the counter, and placed a phone next to it. A burner phone, disposable, plain, cold gray. I didn't touch it. She didn't push it toward me. "It rings only once," she said softly. "Answer immediately." I cleared my throat. "Who will it be?" She looked at me like I'd asked what air was made of. "The only one that matters." Then she paid for her book, with cash. She didn't ask for a bag. She didn't ask for change. She didn't say thank you. She just turned and left. The bell above the door rang, and that was the moment I knew. He'd never really left. He'd just let me exist between breaths. A pause. Not a reprieve. The phone sat on the counter like a loaded question. I slipped it into my coat pocket and locked the register. Closed early. No explanation. No apology. I walked home as the sky darkened. Fast. A storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Back in my apartment, lights off, coat still on, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the phone. Part of me wanted to throw it out the window. Another part of me knew it would find its way back inside. Eventually, all paths lead to a single choice. And that choice is usually the one you've been avoiding since the moment everything began. I counted my breaths. 8, then 10, then 12. At 14, the phone rang. Only once. I answered without hesitation. His voice poured through the speaker like whiskey over ice, steady, controlled, low. "Good evening, Arya." I said nothing. I couldn't. "I'll assume you have questions," he continued. "Some people choke on them. Others sharpen them like weapons. You strike me as someone who waits." Another breath. Slow. Studied. I respect that. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with intent. Finally I spoke. Quiet. Careful. "What do you want from me?" A faint shift in tone. Not victory. Not surprise. Something quieter. Approval. "I want what's already mine." I never agreed. "Arya," he interrupted gently, "you keep thinking this is about permission." My pulse climbed. "Tomorrow," he said, "at 9 p.m., you will step outside your building. You'll walk east. There will be a black car. You will enter it. And if I don't?" "You will," he said calmly, "because tonight you already answered." The line went dead. I didn't realize I was shaking until I heard the phone hit the floor. The next 24 hours tasted metallic. I felt watched everywhere I went. Passing cars lingered too long beside me. Men on street corners seemed more alert. The wind sounded like it carried names. Mine. At work, I barely spoke. Sandra asked if I was sick. I told her I was fine. She didn't believe me. But she also didn't push. I wished she would. I wished someone would force their way past the calm mask I was wearing and ask the things I couldn't say. Because I think I would have answered. Maybe even confessed everything. But nobody did. Nobody ever does when you need them to. At 8:47 p.m., I stood in my apartment staring at the city below. The streets were wet again, like the sky bled every time something irreversible was about to happen. I still had time to run, to disappear, to make a choice that belonged only to me. But free will feels different when it's being observed. At 8:59, I stepped outside. The air was cold, but it wasn't the kind of cold that numbs. It was the kind that heightens, that sharpens nerve endings, that prepares you. And then I saw it. A black car, parked, waiting. Silent engine, no headlights, no movement. I felt a pressure behind my heartbeat. Fear or anticipation? Gray Eyes was in the driver's seat, his window lowered slightly. "Good evening," he said. "You're right on time." I hesitated. "Do I still have a choice?" "Yes. You're choosing right now." I got in. The door closed softly behind me. Not a trap. A seal. We drove, through the city first, past faces that would never know, past lights that had watched everything without judgment, past places that once felt like safety. Then beyond the city, out toward darkness, away from noise, past the point where excuses could still exist. The sky was moonless. Trees lined the road like sentinels. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint rhythm of my pulse. Too slow for fear, too steady for calm. Finally, Gray Eyes spoke. "I worry about you," he said. I turned to him slowly. "Why?" I asked. "Because you don't realize what you are yet." "Then what am I?" He didn't smile. He didn't hesitate. "A signal," he said. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The car turned onto a private road, long, winding, guarded by shadows that watched without eyes. Then, another house. Not the one from before. This one looked older, less perfect, more lived in. The kind of place where truths don't bother wearing masks. Gray Eyes parked, then looked at me. "There is power in obedience," he said softly, "but there's far more in quiet rebellion. Be very careful which one you offer him." The door opened. Night greeted me. I walked toward the house. The door was already ajar. Not an invitation. A test. I pushed it open. Inside, dim light. A piano in the corner. A carafe of whiskey on a low table. Leather armchairs. Heavy curtains. A fireplace on low flame. And him. Standing near the window. Looking out, as though the night answered him. He didn't turn when I entered. But he felt me. I know he did. Because he said softly, "Close the door." I did. Then he turned. And I understood something terribly dangerous. He wasn't drawn to me because I was weak. He was drawn because he saw strength I didn't know I had. And predators hunt two ways. They consume what is fragile, or they crown what is rare. I didn't know yet which one I was, but I knew this. I would not leave unchanged, even if I left alive. He approached slowly, not like a threat, like a conclusion. "Arya," he said quietly, "I want to show you something." His voice felt like the start of a storm I'd already chosen to walk into, and I followed him. Not because I trusted him, but because something in me whispered, wanting can be more dangerous than fearing. And I had already crossed the line where wanting began. He didn't lead me far. Just across the room, toward the window overlooking the woods, the kind of view that looks peaceful until you remember what kind of people hide behind nature. Trees conceal many sins, and tonight they felt like an audience. He stopped beside the piano. The same song I'd played alone in my apartment, hesitant, uncertain, seemed to echo faintly as though the air remembered it. He looked at the keys but didn't play. "Do you know why you're here?" His tone wasn't harsh, not even questioning. It sounded like he already knew the answer and simply wanted to see how close I'd come to it. "No," I said. My voice didn't tremble. That scared me the most. He turned, For the first time, I saw something new in his expression, something unguarded. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't affection. It was consideration. That was far more dangerous. Men like him don't consider people. They assess them. And those they assess, they keep. "You're here because you listened," he said. I swallowed. It was a mistake. "No," he said calmly. "Mistakes are accidents. You hesitated. That means curiosity was involved. And curiosity," he leaned ever so slightly closer, "holds intent." A fireplace crackled in the corner. The sound was soft but felt deliberate, like every detail in this place had been chosen to make silence meaningful, to make hesitation obvious. He motioned to the piano and said, "Sit." I hesitated just long enough to make him notice, but not long enough to make him question. Then I sat. My fingers hovered over the keys, but I didn't play. He stayed standing beside me as though listening to something beneath the floorboards. Then he said quietly, "The night you picked up, do you know why I called that number?" No. I didn't either. I froze slightly. He continued, "Sometimes I dial numbers at random when I need clarity. Patterns soothe me. Probability guides decisions. But that night," his gaze darkened ever so slightly, "that night felt off balance, so I let chance choose." "And I answered," I whispered. He nodded slowly. The amber light from the fireplace flickered across his jawline, casting sharp lines that made his expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to," he said, "but you did. And I listened to your silence. It told me enough." He walked around the piano and sat in the chair across from me. Crossing one leg over the other, he studied me with stillness, a kind trained over years, maybe a lifetime. "You play," he said. "I don't want to." "Wanting isn't part of this," he replied. "You play. Now." I didn't move. For a long few seconds, neither of us breathed loudly enough to disturb the air. My heart thudded once, twice, a third time. Something primal inside me rose, something that wanted to refuse, to run. But something else rose too. Something that wanted to see where this road led, where he would stop me. I pressed a key. C. Just like before. Soft, barely audible. Yet somehow, it filled the entire room. Another. Then another. Tentative melody. Like walking on glass. My hands felt separate from me. Almost obedient, but not fully. Maybe music is the one language the soul speaks, even when held captive. The notes drifted into the dim room, coloring the air between us. He didn't speak, didn't give feedback, just listened, with a kind of focus that felt invasive and intimate. Then, halfway through the melody, my hands froze. He stood, walked slowly behind me. I didn't turn. I sensed warmth, a breath, almost. Not too close, not far. Stillness. Then his voice, quiet, lower than before. "You play like someone waiting for permission to feel." My pulse stumbled. He moved to the window again. "Weakness I don't tolerate. But restraint," he looked out into the woods, "is a form of intelligence. Most people only care about being heard. They forget the danger in being understood." Mist drifted outside, low, white, like a ghost exhaling. Finally, I found my voice. "Why me?" He turned. This time, no mask. Just truth. "Because you don't deny what you feel. You hide it. That takes skill." His gaze flicked to the piano. "But hiding comes with a price. Eventually, someone finds it." I stood. "Is that what you do? Find what people hide?" "No," he said. "I decide whether it deserves to stay buried." A long silence followed. I felt like something was about to change, something permanent. A choice sat between us, and we both knew it. "Come with me," he said suddenly. No explanation, no warning. I followed, through the hallway, down the stairs, into the lower level of the house. We passed doors that looked identical, unremarkable, but each felt weighted, as if stories sat behind them, some still whispering, some long silent. Then he opened one. Inside was nothing special, almost disappointingly plain. Wooden table, 2 chairs, dim light, a single file on the table, and a photograph. He sat, motioned for me to do the same. I did. He slid the photo over. It was a girl, dead, maybe 23, blonde, eyes blue, still faintly open even in death. I felt something cold crawl down my spine. She answered a different call, he said quietly. He didn't describe how she died. He didn't need to. He looked at me, and I knew what he wanted. Reaction. I didn't flinch. He noticed. "Does she frighten you?" he asked. "No," I said. "Why not?" "I don't know her." "And if it was someone you did?" I met his gaze. "I don't think this is about someone I know. I think this is about someone I might become." Silence. Then something unexpected happened. He leaned back, like he'd just heard something he'd been waiting for. "You understand more than most," he said. "That is both valuable and dangerous." I looked at the photo once more. The girl's face started to feel eerily familiar. Not her features, but her expression. Like life had never given her a chance to choose. Like she'd been walking toward this ending long before it happened. What was her mistake? I asked. She trusted too quickly. And mine? You haven't made it yet. The room felt colder, but also clearer. He closed the file, set it aside, and when he looked at me this time, it felt final. "From now forward," he said, "you will know things others don't. That makes you accountable for what you become. I don't deal with innocence. I deal with clarity." My throat tightened. Why show me this? Because clarity comes at a cost. Some people break, others reveal what they truly are. And what do you think I am? He stood, walked slowly behind me. Again, warmth, danger, gravity. "I think," he whispered, "you are trying very hard not to decide." He stepped in front of me, watched me closely. "So here is my offer." His eyes felt like trial and verdict. "I won't force you to remain. I won't coerce you. I won't even touch you." My breath caught. "You will either walk out that door, or you will stay. If you walk out, no one follows. No one calls. You will be gone. And if I stay?" His eyes darkened, just slightly. "Then you belong to a different world, Arya. One where fear is not your enemy, where trust is deadly, where loyalty is currency, and once spent, it cannot be earned again." He extended his hand but didn't reach for me. No touch, no force. A decision suspended between us. "Choose," he said. The word hung in the air like smoke. I stood. The door behind me felt heavy. Real, possible, freedom, sanity, life as it was before. I could still walk away. I walked toward the door. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. My hand touched the knob. I exhaled and found no relief. Then I turned and walked back toward him. Not because I trusted him, not because I submitted, but because the world outside no longer felt honest. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is choose truth over comfort. His eyes followed me carefully. He didn't smile. He just nodded, as though a piece finally moved where it was always meant to. For the first time, he spoke my name differently. "Welcome back, Arya." And in that moment I realized something terrifying. I hadn't chosen him. I'd simply recognized the place I was always meant to arrive. I don't know how long I stood like that. back pressed to the door, knees barely holding me up, but I counted the distance of every step that echoed in the hallway. Each one landed like a threat. They weren't hurried, weren't cautious. They sounded like footsteps that knew they would reach me, like they had all night and all the authority in the world. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the air burned in my lungs. I let it out slowly, as if letting it go too fast would give me away. My phone was still in my hand. I stared at it. No messages, no warnings, just silence, and whatever waited outside my door. Part of me wanted to call the police, the sensible part, the alive part, but something stopped me. Not fear, exactly. Something darker than fear. A quiet instinct saying, if they wanted you dead, you wouldn't have heard the phone call. That thought went through me like a cold blade, and I don't know why, but I believed it. Another footstep. Closer. I backed away from the door until I reached the middle of the room. My shoes squeaked against the wet floorboards. Too loud. Too human. I told myself not to make another sound, but my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it from the hallway. Hell, maybe from the street below. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside. Not a knock, not a voice, just silence. Heavy, like it wanted me to say the first word. This was a game, and I already knew I didn't know the rules. My apartment felt suddenly small, too small. The shadows in the corners seemed to lean toward me like they were curious. A draft carried the smell of cigarette smoke through the walls from a neighbor down the hall. I'd grown used to it. Tonight it felt like last rites. Then 3 knocks. Not polite, not impatient. Just certain. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I heard a muffled voice on the other side of the door. Male, low, controlled. Arya Stone? I hesitated. Another voice followed, the second one deeper than gravel. Miss Stone, you should open the door. We're not here to hurt you, unless we have to. Something in me flinched when he said my name. They knew who I was. More than that, they used his tone like they'd practiced it, like they expected me to obey. I stepped forward, slowly, like I didn't fully control my legs anymore. My fingers found the door handle. I didn't remember raising my hand to it, but there it was, trembling. One last moment of silence passed through me. A thought, if I open this door, nothing goes back to normal. A deeper, quieter thought followed. Maybe normal was already gone. I unlocked it. The door opened 3 inches and was pushed open the rest of the way from outside. I stumbled back a step, blinking hard at the fluorescent hallway lights, and the 2 men who stood there. Black coats, suits underneath, not cheap ones. They looked like they were born knowing how to move through. Dangerous places. One was tall with sharp features and eyes that scanned everything. The other had broader shoulders and hands that looked like they'd broken bones before. The taller one spoke first. Miss Stone, sorry for the late visit. That was a lie. He wasn't sorry at all. He stepped inside without being invited. The other followed, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. That little sound made my skin crawl. Who are you? My voice came back, barely, but I managed to sound stronger than I felt. And that surprised me. A lot. The sharper one smiled faintly, like he respected it. We're associates of someone who spoke with you earlier tonight. My stomach dropped, but I didn't react. Not physically. I just felt everything inside me brace like impact was coming. The broader man walked toward my window and looked at the street below, as if checking escape routes, or planning one. He seemed bored. That somehow felt worse. I didn't know who he was, I said, more to myself than to them. Now you do, the taller one replied. He looked around my apartment like it was a crime scene waiting to happen. Where is he? My voice was fragile, but it made it through. You'll meet him soon enough, he said simply. Tonight isn't for that. We're just here to escort your cooperation. Cooperation. The word hit me like a cold slap. You mean make sure I don't run? The broader one turned from the window at that. He actually smiled. A small one. If you try to run, you'll find that considerably difficult from this height. I didn't know whether to be relieved he thought I was stupid enough to jump, or terrified that he wasn't ruling it out. The taller one glanced at me again. He asked us to check if you were reasonable. My pulse was everywhere, my fingertips, my throat, my stomach. But somehow I made myself ask, and what if I'm not? He stepped closer, just enough to take my breath without touching me. His voice lowered, but not in warning, in respect. Then this changes for the worse. There was no anger in his tone, which made it worse. I'm not unreasonable, I said. And it wasn't a bluff. I didn't think it was, but it felt like a line, and I didn't know who wrote it. The broader one spoke up. Miss Stone. He chose not to send the police after you, or anyone with less patience than us. He glanced at my phone on the table. There were other ways to handle your mistake tonight. The word mistake struck deeper than I expected. It hurt, because somehow it already felt bigger than that. I picked up a phone, I said. That's all. But I didn't believe that. Not anymore. The tall one looked me in the eye. For the first time, I felt something human behind his stare. Something tired. You picked up his phone. That silence again. Thick enough to hold a threat. A strange truth dawned on me, then clearer than all the fear. When I picked up that call, it picked me back. He gestured to the couch. Sit, Miss Stone. I did, slowly. He took the chair opposite me. The broader one remained standing, guarding the door like he expected me to sprout wings and fly. The taller man leaned forward, fingers laced, studying me. Miss Stone, he said slowly, carefully, as if choosing each word mattered. We need to ask you some questions. Answer honestly. Even incomplete honesty, if it's intentional, could end poorly. I swallowed. Hard. I understand, he nodded. Good. Then I'll only ask once. He held my gaze as though he was anchoring me with it. When he called, did you tell anyone about it? I shook my head. No. Did you record it? No. Did you try to look up the number? My breath snagged. Yes. Both men exchanged the smallest glance. Just one, but it held meaning. I couldn't find anything, I added quickly. No results. Nothing. It was blocked or hidden or controlled, the tall man finished for me. My pulse hammered so loudly I wondered if they could hear it. Am I in danger? He hesitated, then gave the most honest answer possible. Not if he still wants you alive. A chill went through me, worse than the rain, because want was not the word you used for safety. Another silence, another breath that shook. Why me? I asked. Because you answered. He paused, then, and because he made a decision. What decision? The taller one leaned back, with a slight shift in his expression. Not cruel, not even threatening, just resigned. That you're now under his protection. The words sank in slowly, wrongly. Protection? From who? The broader man answered this time. Miss Stone. If you need protection from him, then you don't realize what he's protecting you from. I stared at both of them, feeling reality slide sideways. Was this mercy or possession? Was there even a difference with a man like him? The taller one stood, signaling that the conversation was over. Get some rest. You'll be taken to him soon. My breath froze. Taken? He nodded. Tomorrow, we'll escort you. Until then, you won't leave this building, and someone will remain outside your door all night. Why? I asked, voice thin. That same answer, quiet, sharp, final. Because now, you belong to him. The door opened, but I didn't remember unlocking it. The men stepped into the hallway. Before leaving, the taller one turned back. For the first time, his voice softened, not with kindness, but with warning wrapped in care. Try not to be afraid tonight. It attracts attention. Then they were gone. The door clicked shut. Silence moved in. The kind of silence that lets only your thoughts scream. I stood in the middle of the room like I didn't belong to it anymore. My reflection in the window looked like a memory already fading. I thought about running. I thought about calling someone, anyone. But I knew this wasn't a path you walked back from. That phone call wasn't an accident. It was a door. And now I was on the other side of it. That night, sleep never came. Only the city humming below my window, and the stranger standing guard just outside my door. Somehow, knowing he was out there didn't frighten me halfway as much as knowing who sent him, and what tomorrow would bring. Because I could still hear his voice on the phone. I don't chase. I claim. And now you belong to me. I didn't know his name, but something in me already knew his shadow. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even blinked. I lay there with my eyes open to the ceiling as if closing them would invite something in. Something with his voice. Something with his name. Morning didn't come gently. It arrived like sirens, like interrogation lights, like judgment. Pale, cold, deliberate. I expected someone to knock, or drag me, or tell me to get up and follow them, but no one came. The silence was stranger than any threat. By noon, I convinced myself it had all been some mistake, maybe a twisted scare tactic. Maybe I just picked up the wrong call, and some people enjoyed reminding me of that. I almost believed it until I saw the envelope under my door. Cream paper. No name. Just one word written on the front in careful black ink. Wait. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The handwriting didn't just deliver a message. It owned it. The residue of last night returned like a fever. Every sound around me suddenly felt suspicious. A car passing outside. Footsteps from the neighbor's apartment. The groan of the elevator moving down the hall. My instincts clawed again, something between fear and anticipation. That word was enough to paralyze me for another hour. Wait. Wait for who? Or what? At 3 p.m, I finally got up. Showered like somebody watching me might judge the temperature of the water. Got dressed like someone might decide whether they liked my outfit. And then I waited, as if exactly that was expected from me. At 4:12 p.m, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it. It rang twice, and before the third ring, it stopped. No message, no callback, no explanation. Just proof that someone was still steering this. 5 minutes later, there were 3 knocks on my door. Same rhythm as last night. Measured, confident, certain. I didn't ask who was there. Something in me already knew I didn't deserve the question. I opened the door. Different man this time. No suit, just a black jacket. Gloves. Eyes as cold as February. His voice had no tone when he spoke, just instruction. "Miss Stone, it's time." No name, no greeting, just time. I don't remember grabbing my coat or slipping into my shoes. I just remember the hallway stretching before me like a tunnel leading to fate I hadn't chosen, but was expected to accept. We took the elevator down. No one spoke. In the mirrored walls, I barely recognized my own reflection. The man beside me didn't look at me once, as if I was cargo, not company. Outside, a black car waited at the curb. Sleek, unsuspicious. The kind of car that existed to not be noticed. The back door opened from inside before I reached it. A woman sat there. Pale skin, dark hair, eyes you'd call beautiful if they weren't so deadened. She didn't smile, but she looked at me differently than the others. Not with threat, not with authority, with curiosity, as if she was wondering whether I'd survive this. "You'll sit with me," she said softly. I got in. The man closed the door behind me and took the front seat. The car moved. The city felt different from behind tinted windows, blurred, distant, powerless. I watched buildings pass like I was seeing them for the last time. The woman finally spoke. Her voice sounded like smoke. "I'm Alara." "Arya," I said quietly. "I know." A quiet beat passed. Then, "You've met his men." "Last night," I said. "2 of them." "They weren't the dangerous ones," she replied. That sentence changed the temperature of the air. I turned to face her. "Are you one of the dangerous ones?" She didn't answer at first, just watched the streets as they bled into evening. Then, "I'm one of the loyal ones." That chilled me more than a threat, because loyalty is often more lethal than violence. After a while, she spoke again. "He rarely contacts anyone himself, and he never calls twice, so I suppose that makes you interesting." "Or unlucky," I muttered. Alara's lips curved, almost into a smile. "With him, it's the same thing." I felt that line slip into my bloodstream like poison, or prophecy. As the sun lowered behind the skyline, the city started lighting itself like a ritual. Street lamps, shop signs, reflections vibrating in puddles. I felt strangely detached from it, like I was already fading into the shadow of Victor Hale before I even saw him. The car slowed as we turned into a quiet part of town. Old industrial buildings, few windows, fewer witnesses. The kind of place where rust got comfortable. I counted the streetlights because something in me didn't know how much longer I'd have anything left to count. The car stopped at a nondescript brick building with black doors and no signs. Alara rested her hand on mine. No warmth, no comfort. Just something like warning disguised as tenderness. "When we enter," she said softly, "speak only when spoken to. Move only when told. And don't look him directly in the eyes." She paused, just long enough to make my pulse stutter. "Not unless he wants you to." I swallowed hard. What happens if I do? Alara turned to face me fully, and for just a second, the mask fell from her face. "Then he'll know everything about you." The doors opened. A long hallway awaited. A heartbeat later, I followed her inside, and all I could think was, this is how a quiet life ends. Not with a scream, but with footsteps you follow by choice, even when you know you shouldn't. If you like the story, please subscribe to Mara's Betrayal.